Where is Daredevil?
I'm right here. Don't miss the return of Marvel Television's Daredevil Born Again.
So what's next?
I feel liberated.
We're gonna take this city back.
Over medicated.
In an all-new season, now streaming only on Disney+.
They're hunting us. It's time we started hunting them.
I can work with that.
This should be tons of fun.
Marvel Television's Daredevil Born Again, now streaming only on Disney+.
Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content and $7 Productions. Afghanistan, 2014. The Joint Tactical Air Controller peeks over the edge of a crumbling mud brick wall, his heart hammering against his ribs. A split second later, an incoming round slams into the wall inches from his face, spraying him with dirt and stone. He ducks back, pressing his spine against the wall as a green beret slides into cover behind him. The operator leans out, lets loose a controlled burst from his rifle, and ducks back just as a white-hot RPG streak shrieks overhead, detonating against a nearby building with a bone-shaking roar. This village is a hornet's nest. Every window is a muzzle flash. Every shadow hides an insurgent. The JTAC pulls his radio, his voice a strained but disciplined whisper over the deafening crackle of small arms fire. He isn't calling for a retreat. He isn't calling for evacuation. He's calling for a danger-close airstrike. "10,000 feet above the screaming chaos is the cold, mechanical hum of an AC-130 Spectre, a 155,000-pound behemoth of a cargo ship converted into a flying fortress. It's banked in a steep, relentless pylon turn. Inside the dim, red-lit belly of the beast, Special Operations Aviator Anthony Dyer looks at his monitors. Through the green haze of night vision and high-def thermal, the battlefield looks like an ant farm of white-hot signatures. He can see the RPGs. He can hear the desperate breathing of the men in the dirt through his headset. He steels himself, his hand hovering over the controls. Then, the radio crackles with the words that change the physics of the firefight.
You are cleared to engage.
The sky opens up. A massive explosion rocks the airframe as the 105mm howitzer unloads, sending a shell the size of a fire extinguisher screaming into the enemy's front door. It is followed by the heavy, rhythmic thudding of the 40mm Bofors cannon. Finally, the Vulcan gun spins up, a sound like a giant metallic zipper tearing through the very fabric of the atmosphere. Down in the village, the houses hiding the ambush simply evaporate in a geyser of fire and pulverized brick. Anthony Dyer and his 13-man crew aren't just providing close air support. They are raining down devastation on an enemy that never even heard them coming. Hello, and welcome back to Badass of the Week, the show where we tell the badass history of badasses. I am joined today by a very special guest. He is a retired special missions aviator for the U.S. Air Force who served on the AC-130 and HH-60 Pavehawk. And he's the author of the new book, Moonchild. Please welcome Anthony Dyer. Anthony, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking to us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ben. I wouldn't miss this one for the world, man. Thank you.
Yeah. I think some kind of history is happening here in the 150. I went back and looked today in the 150 episode history of Badass of the Week. I think you're the first actual war hero I've interviewed. So that's kind of cool.
No, I'm honored to be here, man. I appreciate having me, man. I'm looking forward to the chat, man.
Yeah. So I got your book. I think one of your people emailed us and was like, "Hey, I've got this book. It's about a bunch of badass stuff." And I was like, "All right, send it to me." And I got Moonchild and I read through it and I was like, "Yeah, this is definitely badass."
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed the read, man. It's a short read, probably 2 hours, man. I think I've heard from actually some of the people I used to fly with, it's the only book in 2 hours where you sort of go through all the emotions, laugh, cry, anything in between, man. So a lot of funny stories in there as well. So
definitely, it's kind of your memoir of your service. It is about. I read it on a plane while I was flying down to California, and so I guess what I want to do today is kind of talk through your journey. But before we dive into that, let's first take a quick ad break. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Badass of the Week. I'm here with Anthony Dyer. And Anthony, let's walk through your story. So you're originally from the Appalachian Mountains. And before we get into the 105 millimeter cannons and all that good stuff, what was the first thing that kind of attracted you to the Air Force? Is it just call for adventure, or were you just looking for the biggest engine you could work on?
Yeah. It was definitely me sort of going in the wrong direction my senior year in high school, and call it about 6 months before I joined. My dad gives me that cliched, talk like, son, you're about to be a grown man. It's time to get a job, go to college, get out. And I talked to a Navy recruiter at first, and he was like, yeah, man, you could be on a boat for 6 months. And I was like, man, I don't want to mess with that. And then the Army recruiter, I was like, I don't really, yeah, I was like, I don't really need that either, right? And so I talked to my dad sort of about the quality of life of the Air Force, man. And he was actually in MacDill way before I was born. And, he did Vietnam and all that stuff as a communications guy down there. He talked to me about the quality of life, the good chow halls, the TDYs and the golf clubs and all the good stuff the Army guys give us crap about. But yeah, it was looking back at it, the best decision I could have made at that point, because I was going nowhere fast and, no drive, no direction. There was words like, in the Air Force, like service before self is a core value, right? Like things like that and duty and honor. Like I didn't know what those words meant till later in my career. And to be honest with you, I sort of signed up for a paycheck. And if I wanted to go to college, I have money for that as well. And there I was, July 18th of 2000 on my first fixed wing flight from Charlotte to San Antonio, Texas. And here I am. So
that was your first flight ever though, right?
Yeah. So I had a helicopter ride in actually near Knoxville or over Gatlinburg, that area. As a kid, my good friend JB, she actually came out from our retirement. We did it was a helicopter ride, and I got to see the Smokies from that angle, a bird's eye view. And I was like, remember thinking of that moment, like I knew, like sort of indirectly, and she knew, I think, that aviation would have some part in my life, like a big part of it, and like that quote says by, I think it's John Secondary, says, where like, once a man's tasted flight, like he'll forever walk with his eyes, towards the sky, because that's where he belongs, always longing to return. So, sure.
So wait, am I understanding correctly that your first flight on an airplane was on your way to the Air Force?
Yeah. My first airplane like fixed wing flight, with the exception of that helicopter ride I had when I was a kid, but that was it, man.
Wow. You're like, I hope I like this.
Oh yeah.
Cool. So you go to basic, and your first job is not, you don't immediately go into special operations. You start somewhere else instead.
I did, yeah. I was what they call a load toad, is a weapons loader, and that's basically a nice way of saying the guy or girl who loads the bombs and missiles on the in my case, the F-15 Strike Eagle, and usually like a 3-person crew, and this was before like 9/11. I remember I had been there about a year and some change at that point at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, and before that had happened, and then that happened, and that's when I sort of realized, like, I was like, man, like when I saw the 343 firefighters running that day, like all that, like I knew that day had changed a lot of lives and our sort of mentality in America, and I'd be lying if there wasn't some vengeance there. Like I didn't want to sit on the sideline anymore. I wanted some sort of, at that point, like to make a difference, and I saw those firefighters and that number and the police officers as well. I was like, what's different in those guys' DNA, right? Where they run towards that burning fire and when everyone else is running out. And so at that point, I definitely knew I wanted to try the fire department thing out. And about approximately 5 years later, that's when I signed up to be an Air Force firefighter, and I went to the Lewis F. Garland DOD Fire Academy. And I was about 5 years in Charleston, the firehouse there, Charleston Air Force Base, and that was an awesome community, man. I tell people I developed a full arsenal of pranks, man. You name it, we probably did it to each other in that firehouse, man. But it was a blessing being there with those guys. And about 2010 is when I really realized, like, man, like I still sitting on the sidelines, right? And I'm actually at a pizza joint with some friends, and I tell people I look out, and I'm on leave at this point. I look out, I see the same cracks in the road, man, and I was like, those cracks have been there my whole life, man. Like, I realized at a young age, that moment you're born, you start dying, right? And I was like, I don't leave cracks, I don't leave craters. And that's when I, decided to sign up for the mighty 16th Special Operations Squadron and the mighty AC-130 Ace Model Spectre gunship. And that first, flight, my second flight really after that, that's when I decided I want to do this for the rest of my life, man.
Wow. Okay. So let's back it up for a sec. So you join the Air Force, you're an F-15 weapons loader. So you're basically part of a team that's like wrestling massive missiles and bombs onto a fighter jet in the heat and the cold. how does the ground level experience with the heavy ordnance kind of shape your respect for the destructive power that you're soon going to be deploying from the air?
Oh yeah. When you start we have what's called a jammer. So just a basic hydraulic lift truck, if you will. And they call us load toes because you would have to put the legs out on some of the heavy munitions, right, to get more of a leverage from the ground, a brace, and then you would load them up into these brew racks, and like you definitely realize, like, man, if that thing hits the ground, right, like, especially when you start getting into fuses, right,
I'm going to be in big trouble.
yeah, man.
If I survive, I'm going to be in bigger trouble.
I've been going down history for all the wrong reasons at that point, and there was a point too, realizing, like, with Operation Noble Eagle, like, if you remember, we were sending fighter jets up to New York City after all that had happened. And and I remember loading those live, AIM-9s and stuff like that, being like, man, like, if this missile doesn't come back, like, that's potentially an airline or someone's life, right? And so it definitely gives you more of respect, like, this is the real deal type thing, and, different munitions are marked with different colors, which mean, real versus not real and stuff like that. And that was my first time actually handling, like, a live munition,
Right. And that's a really interesting thing because you sign up before September 11th, and then after the attacks, everything kind of changes. And yeah, you're loading live ammo onto an F-15 to be, like, deployed in the United States, right? That had to have been intense, right?
Yeah. And I was on a mid shift back then. It was like 11 to 7, and my show my age here, but we had a day room, like a common area. Think about,
I think you're like a year older than me. If you were a year out of college when that happened, we're like the same age.
I got you, man. But yeah, it was a common area, think about like a college dorm, right? You have like a common area where you can watch TV, cook, stuff like that, and call it the day room. And my buddy had knocked on my door and said, "Dyer, have you seen what happened?" And I was like, "No, man, I haven't." And I remember walking in there in this tube style TV that had like maybe 3 channels, one of those being like AFN, and I realized, the first one hit, and then the time we got there, the second one, that's when it hit. And I was like, man, like, this is deep. That's when, our lives have changed forever in this country at that point, right?
Absolutely. And then you watch the coverage on TV, and it makes you want to be a firefighter because you try to, like, I want to be where I can help. I want to be where I can do something. So you go and you join Air Force firefighters, but then, like you said, you're kind of stationed a little bit more back, stationed stateside. So you're not still feel like there's more to be done because at this point, Air Force is being deployed overseas, and you're still back home trying to help, but it's not quite what you were hoping for.
Yeah. And I had something. I haven't really talked a lot about this, but there was a book I read in the firehouse too. It's called Chosen Soldier by Dick Couch, and I went back from that trip on leave and the pizza joint and all that, and I started reading into special operations. And in the beginning of that book, and it's called Chosen Soldier, there's the Isaiah 6:8, like the send me verse, if you will, and that, to me, that's always been a very special, like, special operations centric, verse, like these uncommon type jobs, like the sort of like the 1 in the 100 Heraclitus talks about, like always inspired to be like that, and I think physically I knew, like, realistically, like, I could never be like an operator, right? But what I could do is be an aviator, man, and provide that close air support, make sure those super ninjas, as I call them, get home. And that's what it was all about. You're those guys' lifeline a lot of times. So.
Yeah. So you get into it. You transition to Special Missions Aviator, and you're put on the AC-130, the Spectre, right?
Correct.
And this, Anthony, I have to say, is a vehicle that I have an intimate personal knowledge of, an intimate personal relationship with. So I don't want to brag, but in 2007, I played that one level of Call of Duty. So basically the same, right?
I get asked about that a lot, and then the Tyrese.
It's just like that, right?
Yeah, the Transformers scene, and then you start seeing saber rounds come out, things we don't have, right? But yeah, it's definitely a feared platform by our nation's enemies and stuff like that. And I tell people there's letters all around that squadron, right? And there's this one, I call it sort of the cornerstone of my why, right? There's this Ranger holding his baby girl, and he thanks the squadron, the 16th, and the gunship for those rounds, because that was the whole reason he got to go back and see his family was from that close air support. And you realize that that's the whole why, is to get those guys out of their worst day or possibly last day. And that's an awesome responsibility, man. And I never took that lightly. And I'd be lying if I didn't say, like, I didn't chase that feeling, those 3 words, clear to engage, and that's, to me, that was everything. And when that's gone, man, that's a hard thing to swallow,
Sure, absolutely. So let's set the stage for the Spectre, because that's going to be a major part of your story here.
Yeah.
So the Spectre's built on the chassis of the C-130. It's like kind of the final evolution of side-firing gunships. It's kind of starts with what your dad was talking about Vietnam. You had door gunners and things like that. But so they basically strapped an artillery piece onto the airframe of a C-130 transport transport plane. And for those people who aren't quite familiar with the vehicle, it's a 4-engine cargo plane with a bunch of cannons and stuff pointing out one side of it. And it gets above the enemy, usually at night, and it does what's called a pylon turn, which is a continuous banking orbit around a fixed point on the ground. It's like a 150,000 pound fortress in the sky that circles above the enemy. You receive radio communications from guys on the ground, usually Rangers or SEALs, Delta, somebody like that, some kind of special operations guys. And they're kind of telling you where they need you to put rounds. Now, the AC-130 enters service in the early 70s. It's got several pieces of artillery attached to it that we'll talk about. Now, Anthony, in this part of the story, you're basically firing 1940s era artillery out the door of a 1950s era cargo plane using technology from the future while pulling 2Gs in a banking turn so steep that it would send airline passengers into a panic. Is that about right?
Yeah. And that's incredible, about that, because the 40 mil Bofors cannon, right? So that started out as a Navy anti-aircraft, be fired from a ship like towards the aircraft in the sky, right? And I remember taking the ammo can. I could even, if you go to the squadron this day, there's like the casings and stuff. It's like 1940 something. Somewhere in Tennessee, they made the 40 mil Bofors rounds. So you're opening this can up, and this ammo that's been there, God knows how long. It's probably been redone and stuff like that. But yeah, and
I hope it fires, right?
yeah. As long as it comes out the aircraft, man, that's all that matters. And the 105, man, is if you were to basically, like you said, sort of like a M1 tank, like a tank cannon, you were hanging on the side of this cargo aircraft. And, I tell people we could get up to 10 rounds per minute out in a minute. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but you could imagine being on the ground. There's these 45-pound shells coming at you and just blowing up everything around you, and
10 rounds every 6 seconds, right?
Yeah, it was insane.
It's an M102 howitzer, right? It's 105. It's the same caliber tank gun they put on the Abrams. So it's a 105 millimeter cannon. You've got 20 millimeter Vulcan guns. You've got a 40 millimeter Bofors cannon, and that's a lot of firepower coming down at you from 3 miles up in the dark.
Yeah, and it was what was beautiful about it, though, I call it organized chaos, because you had everyone. Back then we had 13 crew members, so you had the pilot up from all the way back to the gun deck. We had 4 gunners back then, and all working in sync, to get this 10 rounds per minute out. And it's a thing of beauty when you see this sort of symphony of, like, this one guy's throwing a round in, the other guy's closing the breech, arming it, gun goes boom. By the time you kick it out, another guy's already got this 45-pound shell aimed towards it, and there was some sticky situations, though, when you get like a failure fire with like the primer's been sucked. You got to assume at that point we'd actually have a procedure where you would have to throw it out, jettison out the aircraft, because it could inboard detonate, and yeah, so that was
yeah, I didn't even think about that, like a misfire.
Yeah, something like that, and it was definitely sort of what you're getting at earlier, that respect for that firepower,
Right. I get panicky when like the 9 millimeter jams at the gun range, right?
For sure, bro.
So, all right. So you are, you're firing these guns, you're manning them. You're a special missions aviator, which is not just a job change from firefighter and weapons loader. This is like a complete mental overhaul. So instead of a loader, you're a flight engineer, the load master, you're aerial marksman. What was kind of your welcome to the big leagues moment where you realized that this was going to be a completely different animal than the rest of the Air Force?
I would definitely say, like, even my first flight, and I love this story, man. I put it in the book there because it went so bad, Ben, to where, like, I didn't know where I was.
I read it.
Man.
I'm setting you up for it.
Yeah.
I want you to tell it.
And my head's spinning right, and basically my instructor said something to the effect of, like, you're the reason they have to brief seatbelts on airliners, and and you hear that, right? And I get to the end of that flight, and I'm licking my wounds, feeling sorry for all that dumb stuff, right? And like, he sees me, he's like, hey man, he's like, what's the most important word in the dictionary? And I was like, man, I don't even know where I'm at right now. And he's like, perseverance, and he's like, I want you to think about what that word means to you and come back next flight ready to fight, man. And I did, man. I thought a lot about it. And there was this I always called it like a Notre Dame has basically a sign that play like a champion tonight, that sign, right?
Sure.
We have one in Old English, and it was like, we who pass through these portals stand tall. And I remembered like that was my moment, man, where like no matter what was going on in my life, you know, I was going to stop it right there, and I'm getting ready to get in the arena, right, and fly and get those rounds at. And it always meant a lot to me, man. And to this day, I keep up with that guy, and he actually left me my first review on my Amazon, and I just like reached out to him. I was like, thank you so much, bro. And we had a cool moment talking together about that. So
that's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great, right? And then that's the thing that comes up a lot when we talk about these badasses from history and things, is that, you know, nobody's ever awesome the first time they try something, right?
Oh yeah.
Because there's always room for improvement. And then the kind of one of the messages we like to talk about on this show is that, like, just because you messed up the first time doesn't you got to keep going, right? You can't give up just because you had one setback.
Yeah, you look at
or 1,000 setbacks, honestly.
yeah, and not to give a cliche metaphor here, man, but like, you know, you look at an aircraft and how it flies anyway, right? And like Henry Ford said, it takes off against the wind, not with it. So you need that drag index a little bit, right, to give you that elevation, you know. And I've noticed a lot of times.
That's a cool way of looking at that.
Yeah, and I've noticed a lot of times, like, you know, when you're going through it, man, like you find yourself isolated, and you'll find, you know, the Creator, God, whoever you want to believe in, man, they'll put you in isolation before elevation, man. So I tell people, like, it's not if, it's when you're going to fall, man. But I think they just want to see you get back up, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Shaq missed like 15,000 free throws and he's still in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, man. Yeah, Michael Jordan got cut from his, was it high school team his first year when he tried out?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
He didn't start his first year at North Carolina.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, too. And talking about basketball, man, I remember even before, like, my roots part of my story for the Roots and Wings, like, there was this basketball camp. There was Lenore Ryan as a coach from up the road there. And he would shoot like 100 free throws, man. Like, I'll never forget this older man shooting, like, and he may have missed one, I swear to God, man. And like his whole point, he'd get at the end of that thing, he'd be like, hey, the secret to success in life and anything is repetition, man. So I tell people with those two words, man, you know, repetition and perseverance, you can go anywhere in the world, bro.
I agree that that's a key component of badass stuff. So, okay, let's take a quick ad break and stick around, because when we come back, we're going to talk about the Spectre. All right, welcome back to Badass of the Week. I'm here with Anthony Dyer. And Anthony, let's talk about the Spectre. So you're in Afghanistan, Iraq. You're coming to the aid of special operations teams. When things are going bad, they call you guys in. You're traveling, you're operating mostly at night. So your entire life is seen through night vision goggles. Right. Now your ship, kind of walk us through the Spectre, just as a crew member. What's it like? We've seen it. You've seen pictures of it. Like you said, Transformers and Call of Duty is how a lot of people know the ship. But like, and it's very pretty when you look at it, you know, on YouTube or watch videos of it flying overhead. But I imagine on the inside, it's loud and vibrating. And what's it like inside the ship?
As a gunner on it, I would definitely equate it to being something like a coal miner, or like the guy that's throwing the coal in like a steam engine, right? And you know, you have these 13 crew members, and if you want, man, I could sort of go over my first shoot, because we had landed at Bagram from a previous operation. We had a shot at this point, and I was reloading the tweak rounds, and the 105, just like any weapon, like an M4, for example, you're gonna have to spend a few rounds to get your sights lined in, right? And so the same thing with the 105, and I'm loading this ammo rack back with like 7 105 shells, and what it was, the pilot came back to the gun deck with some products and stuff like that, and he's like, hey guys, there's a Green Beret team that's pinned down in northeastern Afghanistan. He's like, you know, they're getting hit with RPGs and all this other stuff. He's like, who's with me? And everybody in their own way send me, right? And I remember flying, you were talking about the 20 mil Bofors cannon, so we didn't have those at this point. We had the 40 mil on the 105 and the Ace model. They had took those off, and we had 2 windows where they used to be. And that's what I was looking at, you know, and I remember it's rare we find a day, like pinky times, what we call it. So I put my monocle NVG down, and I look down, man, and there's these basically like 2 bright flashes, boom, boom. And what that was the 2 RPGs. And at that point, they had fired those at our, our Green Beret team. They also had explosive packs on and stuff like that. And, I called them out to the whole crew and let them know what was going on. And I got back on the 40 mil Bofors cannon, and we shot about 60 rounds of, 40 HEI, high explosive incendiary. And I remember at that point, like when the dust settled, like we got the 3 enemy killed in action, but the point was those guys got to go home that morning. You know what I mean? So I was like, this is what I want to do for the very rest of my life, man. That was that sense of relevance, or whatever you want to call that, man. Like, to me, I got to do more for my country in an hour and a half than I had done my whole life.
Yeah, and that seems really powerful. Like you said, seeing the photo in the ready room of the Ranger being like, "You guys saved my life," right? You guys get called in after things have already gone bad, right? You're already playing from behind by the time you show up, because whoever's down there is in big trouble by the time you get there. And you're there, and you have to operate under high pressure situation. And in a lot of cases, you're firing fairly close to the people you're trying to protect. Oh, yeah. So I feel like that must be stressful. Not to mention that you're lifting 50-pound shells sounds like a hell of a workout. And the pilot is kind of pulling G's while he's trying to keep a beat on the target. How do you kind of adapt to that? How do you find your sea legs on a gunship trying to get used to this routine?
Yeah, it definitely takes a while to get used to. Even like operating at night, man, like everything's blacked out. We may have the MVs, like the very light green lights in the aircraft. Mm-hmm. And just learning to maneuver around the aircraft itself, inside the aircraft, and carrying those shells, and you're at this, like you said, the pylons on this steep angle. So you get used to it, and it also, part of that is learning your crew member, because we would have hard crews deployed, right? And basically you'd train together for 2 weeks before deployment, called a spin-up training. And so you knew each other's, voice by heart. Could tell who it was and what they were saying without even seeing them. You knew their next move by heart, what they were going to do, where they're at in the checklist. And when you see all that come together, man, that, like I said, that symphony of rounds coming out of the aircraft, man, it's you look back at it like, I don't even know how I did that at that point, It's an incredible thing to witness,
Could you hear the guys on the ground?
Yeah. It was especially
were you looped into that radio feed?
Yeah. And so a lot of times the combat controllers, like the JTACs, Tyrese was in that movie, right? You hear the intensity in the voice, and there's this moment where when it starts to inflect a little bit, that voice inflection, they give you the clear to engage, and as they're saying that, you can hear the rounds popping off down, so at that moment it's on, right? That's when it's game on. So
I've heard some of that before, where you'll listen to, you can find some of this stuff on YouTube where you can listen to radio broadcasts, and you can, everybody's trying to stay calm and trying to keep calm, because that's how you survive. But there's times when, the guy starts to sound a little bit nervous, and you can hear gunfire, friendly and enemy through the radio. I imagine that makes it, does that make it harder to focus, or does that make you more focused?
It definitely puts you're definitely more amped to do your job at that point, some adrenaline at that point, because that's someone's life down there, and there's that moment where we got to get these rounds out that fast, and what's hard sometimes though is like if they want a danger close shoot, right? Like basically the guys on the ground are buying that risk,
right.
And there's not a lot of time between like the pilot and all the gun deck for us to really discuss it. We're like, hey, this is it. Like if we don't get rounds out, they're gonna for sure die. But God forbid, the worst thing you could ever do in that world would be fratricide, and so there's definitely this sacred promise between us and those operators, like, hey, we're gonna do everything we can to get those rounds out and get them out of that worst day.
Yeah. This is kind of a weird question, but when the cannon fires, it must recoil, right? Does it shake? Does it move the airframe? Does it shake the airframe when it fires?
Yeah, it's an awesome question. So that we allow up to 49 inches of recoil for the 105. Average you're like 43, 46, about like that. And, we're in this bank, and I think it's about 10 feet every time it fires in the orbit there, So every time you're getting around, you're shifting. Yeah.
The whole plane janks 10 feet every time you fire the gun.
Yeah, it's in this orbit. I forgot how many degrees. Like 10 feet, right? This orbit. And this pilot, he's what we call getting on geometry. So he's flying this rate and coincidence in this trainable box. And this basically there's parts of where the 105 is moving where it won't shoot because you're outside of that box. And like if the wings dip and you got your gun pointed up, think about it like that. You don't want that to happen, right? So that's what he's maintaining that perfect rate and coincidence. So,
dang. So in your crew, you must have fired all the weapons on the 130. So what was your favorite, and what was the biggest pain in the ass?
I would definitely say the 105 was my favorite, man, because you're really more of a flying artillery man at that point,
Yeah.
And the 30 mil Bushmaster, when we went to the different models of gunships, the newer one, right? Like now they have the 30 mil and the 105. Basically the 30 mil is this electrically driven air cooled chain gun. At first, man, just learning that weapon coming from the legacy gunship, like it took a lot, a lot of different malfunctions to learn that weapon. And, you could get some, a lot of jams and feeder jams and stuff like that. You could get stuff I self-induced if I didn't click my clips and the links all the way together, stuff like that. But definitely took a minute to learn that one. That you could, loading the ammo bin in itself, if you're a bigger guy, just reaching down there with your vest and your NVGs and your helmet on, took a lot of coordination, which I never had. So yeah.
So, okay. So we've talked about, obviously it feels great when you're able to get the radio call that like it was a good hit and you've successfully like helped these people, right? These guys on the ground are in big trouble. You're able to come in there and save the day. The cavalry's arrived. You delete the enemy, and your guys get to go home. The Americans get to go home. Yeah. Now, the other side of that is you're looking through your NVGs, and the brightly colored blobs that are disappearing are people that you're blasting. Now, what's your thought process when in coming to grips with that?
Yeah. So there's definitely like you have to see the bigger picture. Like yes, there is someone at the other end of that weapon that's going to die, the enemy, right? But you realize if you don't do that, our guys are going to die. So to me, it was always necessary, especially in those situations. And I mean, the guys got explosive packs firing RPGs on our guys. Like we're going to get rounds out and get our guys home.
Yeah. I don't think about it.
Oh yeah. Just don't. Yeah. At that point, you never really give it a second thought.
Still a little different than pressing X to fire.
Yeah. And it's definitely there is a realization because you debrief every shoot after every shoot, you watch it and everything like that. So you definitely come to grips really fast about what the why behind the gunship, and that is part of that mission. But again, it's all about those dudes and their families, getting them home.
Absolutely. So it's something that I think you do really well with the book is talking not just about all of the badass hardware, but also your personal experiences with it. Now, the book is called Moonchild, and I didn't understand at first, but I got it by the time I started getting into the book. So can you kind of walk us through why you chose that title and what that means to you?
Yeah. So, finding the gunship, man, there's, you're, like you said, you're mostly flying at night, right? And you're finding this a lot of times over terrain and NVGs and stuff like that. The moon was always this lighthouse for me. Like we have get well points in flying where, you could be doing this left-hand orbit all night. It's easy to get lost, in time and space or disoriented where you're at. But the moon's always where it's going to be at that moment, And to me, it was always like a lighthouse for me. And there's some symbology there too, And that's what I've realized with flying, man, is these nights where like everything's against you, right? It could be the emergency procedures, your weapon malfunctions, the weather, the communications, everything's against you, man. That's when everybody depends on you needs to be your very best on the worst day of your life, And so the point is you don't get to fall, you get to rise. And on the darkest nights, that's when that moon burns the brightest,
Do guys get airsick because you're spinning around, you're flying in a circle? Is that like a common thing for air crews?
Yeah, when you first start out, you definitely get airsick, And when I went to helicopters, I got a funny story about getting airsick on that thing, But yeah, definitely takes you a few flights to get your air legs,
Okay, so you are kind of operating by the moon, and that is a good reset point for you because most of the world is sleeping and you're in a pressurized tube at 10,000 feet firing a 105 millimeter cannon. Being kind of nocturnal for 2 decades, does that kind of change how you see normal life or how normal life works for you?
Yeah, definitely. Like, especially when you get back from deployment and you're because downrange, you're sleeping while everybody is working during the day, right? Usually and stuff like that. And then nighttime, that's when you get ready for a flight and stuff like that. So definitely that time shift and doing everything in the dark and vitamin D and everything you lose with that. But yeah, coming back, it's you learn to appreciate the daylight a lot more,
And then, and kind of along those lines, like that's one of the things that I think you do a really good job of in the book is in addition to talking about all the cool stuff, you talk about some of the shadows that follow you around in your career. And I like this a lot because one thing that, I talk about a lot of historical badasses and different characters from history and things, but one thing that I think people don't really consider that as much when they're talking about historical badass as Julius Caesar or somebody is that like badass doesn't mean you have absolutely no emotions and don't feel anything.
Right.
It means that, like you said, with perseverance, like you keep going and you stick out, you stick through it, but you're not like an emotionless, unfeeling robot. And I think you do a good job covering a lot of that in your book.
Yeah, and I think definitely the hardest part, people always ask me the hardest part about writing is being vulnerable, and the humility that comes with that. But what I've learned, like, find the thing that you're most afraid of to say the most, right? And throw it on paper, and you'll be amazed what happens, man. And you'll find there's a common theme between these veterans and these different type of jobs, right? It's like we're very normal men and women doing these very uncommon things, so it's okay not to be okay, but it's, in my mind, it's not okay to do nothing about that. So, I did eventually get help, and feel like I'm a better man for it. So.
Yeah, that's great, because I imagine it is a completely different animal when you're deployed overseas and you're sleeping at day, going out at night, fighting every day, a mission. Then you go home and pull into your driveway and you have to deal with we need to buy more milk.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's little things too, man. Like my biggest thing was like towards the end of my career, like guys were always afraid, like they would get back and let's say I had a newborn at the house or somewhat newborn. And their kid not recognizing them, like to me, I could never deal with that, man. You know what I mean? And I was always afraid of that.
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, I can't imagine. And, but it's a thing that you're doing in order, because you think it's the right thing. It's the right thing to do. And your country needs you, and these guys on the ground need you, and your buddies need you. So it sounds like a really difficult sacrifice to make.
Yeah, definitely. Towards the end of my career, I think I put my daughter through about 4 deployments there at the end, man. And it was, that's when I was getting to the point, like, man, like I realized like the biggest thing I could give my daughter is my time, and that's what, I got back and, sort of my identity was losing at that point too. Cause I went back to gunships my last, couple years there in my sunset tour, and maybe shot once the whole trip. And I realized even that purpose, that identity was gone, and sort of made an emotionally charged decision when I got back and hit the retirement button. And that's when what was a pint on the weekend drinking habit turned into a pint or more at night with, sleeping pills, you name it. And wife gave me the ultimatum, man, of like, it's either a bottle or us. And by the grace of God, I chose my family. So.
Yeah. And that's another war, right? That's another common thread among badasses too, right? People go out, I write about a lot of war heroes and things. And, the story is the way most people tell it. It ends when they get their medal, and then that's the end of the story. And a lot of these people, they're not okay after that. And I feel like that's something that you do a good job of discussing in the book in a very raw way that is a message that I think needs to be told, and it's a story that needs to be told. Okay, so let's go back to the Spectre. So the AC-130H Spectre is retired while you're still on service. Was that sad? They update it. They bring in the new one, but the ship that you served on is retired while you're still there. Did that have any? Were you sad to see it go?
Oh yeah, I was. Man, it was very sad. Because those tail numbers were like 6.9 and 7.2. So these same airframes, from like Vietnam, where people talk about Puff the Magic Dragon and stuff like that. Like you're seeing that history, man. Just go into a boneyard. It is sort of sad. And, I think there's one actually, Azrael, I think is up at the Smithsonian Institute, where it's blocked off there. But there's a couple on stills. But other than that, man, you realize all the blood, sweat, and tears and the stories those aircraft could tell, man, if they could, so.
Right. There are still a couple you can go visit, but it's different. So, okay. You then eventually leave the Spectre, and you go from deleting enemies with a 105 millimeter cannon at 10,000 feet to a Pave Hawk, which basically flies at treetop level and gets shot at by every guy with an AK-47 in the province. What was your thought process?
yeah, man. I remember because there was a manning shortage for the rotary wing aircraft, and I'd realized like if I could ever be a traditional door gunner, like a Vietnam helicopter door gunner, like I would jump on that opportunity. And I'd had a chief that was in that role before, and he asked me, he's like, "Hey, where's the term the whole 9 yards come from?" I was like, "Man, I don't know, chief. I'm about to take your gunner car ride." And it comes from Vietnam when they have 9 yards of ammunition left in their belt of ammo, they're about to run out, what we call Winchester. But yeah, and I remember first time.
Oh, is that where that comes from? I always thought it was a football reference.
It's the whole 9 yards. Basically 9 yards of ammunition left. That's how much you got before you Winchester. And I just remember like looking at this helicopter when I first got there. How's this thing even fly? Especially coming from fixed wing. And definitely struggled through training a lot, man. But I realized like that is, to me, in my opinion, man, in the Air Force, there's no more noble of a mission than these things we do that others may live. That's the rescue motto. And you're flying with the best men and women the Air Force has to offer. And then we have the pararescue guys that fly in the back. They're the very best in the world at what they do. And it was very humble being part of that jolly green community,
Right. So you join the Jolly Green, which is the name of the unit. It's combat search and rescue. And this kind of aligns everything that you've been working on. It kind of summarizes your career up to this point, right? You're loading heavy ordnance, you're firing on enemy, but you're also doing the rescue job that you wanted to do when you signed up to be a firefighter. And you're kind of combining all of this, but I still feel like it might have been a pretty wild transition. So the Pavehawk is a modified version of the Blackhawk. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
And you're getting called into locations all around the world to extract wounded soldiers, rescue soldiers, airmen under fire in a lot of cases. And you said you had an air sickness story. I feel like this might be the time for it.
yeah, man. So I was so I went through the most of my training sitting on the right seat. You have basically, if you think of a right door gunner and a left door gunner, the guy on the right does your hoist, extra stuff like that, and fast ropes and all that. And then the guy on the left, like basically you're just shooting the gun, and you could do AA if you had to, but yeah, I remember we're doing these minigun patterns, man, and I had loaded my ammo all messed up. And there's things they could do where they can bend the tip to like sort of induce a malfunction for the minigun. And basically malfunction after malfunction, my own fault at that point. The ammo sort of goes down in the chute there, and I'm getting woozy. I didn't eat right, all kinds of things. And it's like August in Albuquerque, right? And, or July. And next thing you know, I was like, man, I got to puke, bro. And I didn't say anything. So I stick my head out the window, like as far as I could. And I was like, okay, this door is open, right? This cabin door. I was like, if I get far enough out there, this won't get on anybody. It won't get on the aircraft. I was dead wrong, man. We had both doors open. I'm like, what? So this puke comes back it hits my instructor, and he's on a check right too. It frags him out right here. And he just looks at me and gives me one of these like that, and I knew at that moment, man, I messed up, bro. And, but yeah, but he definitely,
you did say that the minigun was your biggest pain in the ass weapon on the Spectre. And now that's your primary weapon.
well, yeah, it's definitely, you get a lot of malfunctions, but dispersion wise, there's nothing funner than as an enlisted guy anyway, flying on this helicopter with a minigun and you're on white phosphorus MVGs, call it the grip and rip, and you have 2,000 rounds per minute on your right trigger, then 4,000 on your left. And, you blow your load quick with the left one. So it was an awesome job, man. I love the whole community.
And so this is so in June of 2018, you are in a pretty hairy situation. And I kind of want you to tell this story of this June 2018 mission, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem, man. So we were in East Africa, I was thinking June 8, 2018. And basically we were there for this whole week. We were Casevac standby, excuse me. And, we're at day 7.
Casualty evacuation.
Correct, yeah. And basically, we're at day 7 of this operation. It's daytime. I think it's about 3 p.m. or something. And, I went to the TOC in the Tactical Operations Center and talked to the intel analyst, the lady, and she's like, I was like, hey, I'm going to go, take a tactical nap, man. Is everything going good? She's like, yeah. And it's one of those situations when you're holding down that long, you eat when you can eat, sleep when you can sleep. And, but done nothing all week. And then all of a sudden, as soon as I hit my top bunk, man, I hear on my radio handheld, it was like, attention on the net, scramble, scramble, scramble. I got off the bunk bed, have the cardio of a corpse anyway. So the longest, quarter mile of my
have
life.
The cardio of a corpse. I like that. I'm going to start using that.
Yeah. So I run out to this, it's hot too, man, to this quarter mile of the aircraft. And we take off in about 3.5 minutes. And I remember we were in this sort of a right-hand bank. So we took off where we were going right, and the left gunner, he had a worn sear notch, which caused a runaway gun. Basically, without even pulling the trigger, when you armed the 50 cal, it would just continue to fire, right? So this runaway gun, I could see the impacts on the ground, and I had just pulled the CMDS, the flare pins. And for those that don't know, the flares are these big fireballs that shoot at the aircraft to protect us against heat-seeking surface-to-air missiles. And then also the communications with the ground force commander and the JTAC was intermittent at best. And I remember there's literally a moment, man, I'm like, what the F is going on? It was like all this happening, everything that could go wrong would at that point, of course.
Right away, you're 3 minutes, you're still taking off.
Yeah, just off liftoff, all this is going on. And then, I started about 13-minute flight there. And, I remember getting there and you could still see tracer rounds both ways. And so we basically had to fight our way in a little bit, suppressive fire, stuff like that. And what it was there was these 12 Al-Shabaab guys in the tree line. And so we had to do a few gun patterns before we could land and get our guys. So, multiple gun patterns, rounds on target, stuff like that. And the JTAP marked the tree line with like a purple smoke, and that's where we shot at. You know, we knew to shoot at. And it's rare you do close air support with a 50 cal on a rescue helicopter, if ever, you know. So there's all these different.
Right, that's not your job. Your job is your gun is there to defend if like emergency situation, but you're not an attack helicopter. You're a rescue helicopter.
100%, yeah. So that was going on, and we landed on like this narrow road, man. And I remember they brought the first American in, and the PJs put him near the ox tank, and he had to get like a tracheotomy at that point, and then they put another Green Beret beside me, and he had an eye wound, and it was wrapped, you know. And then a partner nation forces guy that got shot in the stomach, and you know, comes up there. He was still walking with his hand on his stomach, and blood's coming out and stuff. And I remember we took back off, and you know, we did multiple gun patterns again while Trail had to get there to Cat Alphas. And what a Cat Alpha is basically the golden hour. You have an hour to get these guys back on the table, or you know, to the operating room or something like that. Yeah, to higher probability of living. And we get back, and I put more, the rotors are still turning, more bullets and more gas in my helicopter. And we go back out there, and Trail had one more guy to pick up. And so we immediately go right back into the gun pattern and, you know, start shooting. I think I shot about probably half my ammo can at that point on the second go. Then we get back and we landed. And I remember the experienced gunner was like, hey, man, he's like, you know, check the helicopter for bullet holes. And I'm like, man, it was that like that really sort of hits you, you know? And so I didn't see any bullet holes or anything like that. And I come around to the front, I see the aircraft commander, the lead pilot, and he's, you know, I could see everything in his face when he was, you know, about to say that an American, once he got on the operating table, would pass, man. And like I said, there was things like, you know, service before self and sacrifice. I didn't know what those words meant till that day. And, you know, unfortunately, someone's brother, someone's son, someone's friend had made the ultimate sacrifice. And to witness that definitely, you know, stays with you forever.
Right. It's one thing to kind of experience, even with the radio frequency in your ear, to experience the battle from up high. It's another thing to have these guys wounded in the helicopter with you. Oh, yeah. And I imagine that's a pretty powerful feeling. I imagine it's more, would it be more difficult to fight, I imagine, with the guys right there with you?
You're saying like if the guy was like with us, so like when we took him to the operating room or something like that?
Yeah, like I just mean like when you know, one thing when Green Beret is radioing in, hey, we need to fire here, versus like actually having actual wounded in the helicopter. I feel like that might make it a little bit more tricky.
Yeah, the helicopter, but it was a lot more up close and personal with all this stuff, you know. And you know, like I said, you see it's a job you never want to have to do. Like I get that now, I truly do, man. It's like could be someone's worst day, someone's last day, you know. But at the end of the day, man, if someone's number's called and their back's against the wall, like I wanted to go, and I think people that sign up for these things is, you know, want to get those guys out of that situation. So,
right, and it's necessary, right? Somebody has to do that job, or those guys are not. None of those guys are going to make it.
100%.
Does one, kind of looking back at your career, does between your time on the Spectre and your time on the Pavehawk, does one seem more badass than the other, or are they just kind of two sides of the same coin?
So I get asked this a lot, man. Basically, people ask like, "Hey, like, which one was your favorite to fly on?" And I have to be sort of careful with it because, like, you know, one side or the other, depending who you pull for. But like, you know, the gunship is this awesome close air support. So it's like a offense, like a quarterback, right? You have this rescue helicopter, which is like a cornerback, the defensive side of things. So it's like apples and oranges. Sort of hard to compare. But I would say, as an enlisted guy, the funnest thing to do was sort of what I was talking about earlier, is to get on that grip and rip, man, and start shooting that minigun on MVGs. That was I love that part of that.
Mm-hmm. I imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, and so you do push the retire button and transition back to regular life, and we've kind of touched on that a little bit. What kind of inspired you to start the book?
Yeah, so I was getting prolonged exposure therapy, and this was when my wife had given me sort of the ultimatum and stuff like that, and I'd realized too, like I was an alcoholic, I was drinking a pint a night, mixing with pills, all that, and I just didn't love myself anymore at that point, man. And so I decided to get the Preservation of the Force and Family, this program that USOCOM has. So each unit has basically a psychiatrist, a physical therapist, and a strength trainer sometimes. And so I was, I'm going to give it a shot, and I told her I didn't want to take any meds. And, I'm talking to this lady at first. I'm like, man, like, what does she know about this and that? And she gave me that cliche thing of like, you wouldn't call a dentist to fix your car, and I was okay, I'll give it a try, man. Got this chip on my shoulder. And the first time you have to write your story out, they get back to the root cause of that trauma, and basically, you write it and write it and write it. Then you get to the point where you're saying it over and over, sort of like we're doing now, just conversing about it, right? And the first time I told the story, man, I cried. I'll be honest, I did. And the psychiatrist cried, and she was like, "You should tell your story like 100 times over and over." And I said, "No. But once I get out, man, and I didn't put this part in the book, and I wish I would have. But like you're going through your DD 214 to get this blanket, right? This paper that says, hey, I served honorably for 20 some years. And oftentimes that's the last time you put that uniform on, and you walk out these rooms, these office type atmospheres, and there's no door handle on the end of that door, man. So you can walk out this thing, but you can never really get back in. And that is a huge thing to swallow. And that's the most common texts and emails I've got from other veterans is like that loss of identity is a very, very real thing that happens. And and I realized, I was like, man, like maybe if people are struggling with this, we talk about the 22 a day, like why can't I pay it forward or pay it backwards in my case? If one person reads the book and gets help and realizes it's okay not to be okay, right? Like, then that's a blessing if they get help, man. That's a win.
Yeah, that's great. Still trying to help people even after, even after your service career.
Yeah, and I was saying that's the biggest thing I've learned about helping, man. Like helping is healing, bro. Like when you see the fruits of that, and because I think we know each other to the fact like there's a difference saying, hey Ben, how's it going, man? Like, hey Ben, how you doing, really, man? And a lot of times people don't realize like there's 100 other veterans that'll pick up that phone if they call, so it's always reach out,
Right. The brotherhood's still there. It's just, you just don't see him every day anymore.
100%.
But people come together. I guess so I like when I do episodes about historical figures and badasses and stuff, I usually like to end the episode by kind of saying, what's the lesson? What can we learn from this story? How can we apply it to our own lives to make ourselves more badass? And I guess in your case, what do you want people to get from Moonchild and from your story?
I would say that, the biggest, perseverance, and there's sort of what that word, means. And, there's so much you can learn about flying, and you're going to fall down, man. And, I'd always heard the proverb, like falling down 7 times, get up 8. And that, 2 things in these jobs, if you sign up and you take that risk, right? Like there's no U-Haul behind a hearse, man. You can't take anything with you when you go. So the whole idea is that the only thing you can leave behind is how you're remembered, and I want to be remembered from someone from helping other people. And that's really the point of the books, to show the rest of America what's going on, and to also to realize it's okay to get help and help people open that door, so that's what I got, man.
I love it. I think that's a great message. Okay. So Anthony Dyer, the book is called Moonchild. It's a memoir. It's a very honest look at your career and what happened after your career. Anthony, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate having you here, and it was awesome to get to talk to you. Where can people find more of your stuff, and where can they find the book?
Yeah, no problem. So my Instagram handles, it's all lowercase Marco_Brolo 21.
Marco
I have a Facebook. Yeah, funny story behind that one too. Yeah. So in the Facebook that says Moonchild, there's a picture of me looking out the windows of my NVGs. And then my email, if you ever need me, is anthonyp.dyer@gmail.com. And the book can be on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere they sell books. You just look up Moonchild, so it'll be there.
Awesome. All right, Anthony, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Ben. It was a true honor and pleasure to be here, man. Like I said, I wouldn't miss this one for the world, so thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate it. And thanks to all of you out there for listening. This has been Badass of the Week. That was Anthony Dyer. The book's called Moonchild, and we do this every week. We really appreciate you guys being here, and we hope you will join us again next week for another one. In the meantime, if you do want to leave us a like or subscribe or a review or any of that stuff, we always appreciate it. And yeah, we'll see you next week with another Badass. Until then, stay badass. Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content and $7 Productions. Executive producers are Dwayne Johnson, Danny Garcia, Andrew Jacobs, Hiram Garcia, Brian Gewirtz, Frankie Chaparino, and of course, me, Ben Thompson. Writing is by me and my semi-regular but always awesome co-host, Dr. Patricia Larish. Story editing by Ian Jacobs. Our mixing, music, and sound design is done by the incomparable Jude Brewer. Production support by Jean McHale-Waite. Badass of the Week is based on my website, badassoftheweek.com, where you can read all sorts of stories about other badasses. If you want to reach out with questions or ideas, you can email us at badasspodcast@badassoftheweek.com. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, follow, listen, tell your friends, and tell your enemies. And please leave us a review. If you want to support Badass of the Week, please check out our Patreon page. We'll be back next week with another one.
How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many
discount.
discounts will you stack up? Tap the banner or visit usaa.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.
Hey marketers, listen up. Before this, there was this. Our voice. It's how we shared knowledge, built communities. Well, guess what? Voice is back. That's why Spotify Advertising has published a new report, The Sound On Era, because audio moves culture forward. And if your brand wants to be heard, you need a Sound On strategy. Go to ads.spotify.com to download The Sound On Era and turn up the volume on your business.